Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our session today, focusing on movement building through cultural events and festivals. This is something that's been in the work as part of our Sustainable Food Places Good Food Movement Building work for a little while. However, due to conversations held between you guys, the members right here, we felt it would be really great to specifically focus in on this theme. So that's why it's here. So just a reminder within Sustainable Food Places, keep talking, keep sharing, keep asking for content like this, because we are listening to you and this is your network. So without further ado, let's kick off. So my name is Vera Zakharov. I am the local action coordinator for the Sustainable Food Places Network. I am based at the food and farming charity Sustain, and I'm joined today by my trusty colleagues and local partners, Andrea Gibbons, who is hello, Andrea. Would you like to introduce yourself? Let me not talk on others' behalf.
Yeah, I'm Andrea. I'm newish, I guess. I've been in post since May, Sustainable Food Places Network Coordinator. So I'm just sort of supporting everyone in the network, particularly to connect and to do things like this. So any thoughts or ideas you have, just get in touch with me. Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Great. And we also have joining us speakers who will introduce themselves more formally when they will be presenting on their stories. But we have Mary from Northeast Lincolnshire, Ian and Purdy and colleagues from Plymouth, and Lauren from Peterborough. But before we get into it, I wanted to take a moment to remind everybody that this is an inclusive, respectful space that promotes and supports diversity. So we'd like everyone to feel welcome, to feel that this is a safe space and treat each other as equals and respect each other's perspectives and expertise, including during conversations, questions, or in the online chat. So please avoid using any outdated or colloquial language or using inappropriate cultural references. And we will not tolerate any kind of discrimination. And please help us to create a space where we can all listen, be heard, be respectful, be open to being challenged and to learning, even if we sometimes get it wrong. So on that note, please do let us know, that's myself and Andrea as your co-hosts today, if there's anything we can do to improve that. And if this interests you as well within your local networks, Sustain has diversity style guide. And of course, within Sustainable Food Places, we also have the Ready for Change toolkit. So there are resources for you to ensure that your spaces and networks are inclusive and actually support promoting diversity, anti-racism, and inclusion. So it feels like a really important way to start. And so on that note, I will start off with a very quick introduction to the Good Food Movement building work before passing on to our wonderful speakers. So go ahead and share screen. There we go. And that's for the benefit. I know we had new folks joining our network, so it's just a wonderful opportunity to introduce others to this work, and hopefully everyone can see that. Great. So Good Food Movement Building, as I expect you probably know, is one of the 6 key themes of the Sustainable Food Places framework of activities. And it's about building public awareness, active food citizenship, and really fostering a local good food movement. But what does that all mean? Well, before I get into it, I just want to remind you guys that we have a Good Food Movement Building guide on the Sustainable Food Places website. I will share the link later, unless somebody beats me to the punch. But yeah, so it contains resources on movement building and the particular Sustainable Food Places approach, because I gotta say, many spaces within a food and farm movement are focusing on movement building. But I think our approach is, well, quite proud of it, but I would be biased, I suppose, having co-developed that. It also includes support on putting diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism at the heart of movement building. And I think this is something important, that no matter where you are in the journey, this is a really important piece of work. But I think especially when you're starting to build networks and movements, that is one of the building blocks of your growing movement. It also contains a framework of activities and actions, which I will outline as well, and further resources, readings, and networks to plug into. So what is movement building? There are many ways to describe it, but I think one that has been referenced and kind of come back to is this the idea of the process of organizing and helping to activate the will and capacity of people and organizations to work collectively toward a vision they all share. So this involves collective action and connected action. And also, it involves a level of autonomy. So I think when it's a movement, when it doesn't fall on the shoulders of one or a small group of people to encourage others to take action. So you can think of examples in our lives, but I think quite recently the movement around reducing single-use plastic and foregoing plastic straws is something that we remember when that change happened, when the penny dropped. So that is something I describe as a movement. And we'd love to see this. In fact, we're already seeing this in the Sustainable Food Places network of organizations and people and grassroots groups getting on with it and connecting with one another. So on putting diversity, anti-racism, and inclusion at the heart of the work is just, as I mentioned before, those who gather at the inception of a movement help determine who joins it. And we are social creatures. And so we join because we care about issues, but we also join because we love the people and we have friends taking part in it. So I think it's really important to remember that. So it's important at any point in your journey to take time to consider the barriers that exist to involvement, to have those discussions early on, and to find ways to meet people where they are, to come to where people and communities are, rather than expect them to come to you. And
Hey,
so,
Vera,
yeah,
Vera, just I know you can't see the chat probably because you're full
right.
screen.
Mm-hmm.
If you could just speak a little slower.
Thank you for letting me
Sorry,
know.
no, that's all right. Someone's put in the chat, and I just often realized.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, you guys. That's a very good call, and always interrupt me if I can't see the chat. So we have existing tools as well, which I mentioned, the Ready for Change and the Sustain Diversity Style Guide. So let me just make sure I can go back and forth. There we go. So on the framework of actions, I won't focus too much on this. I invite you to read the guide to really delve into it. But today we're focusing on an element of inspiring, engaging the wider public on good food. And within this, particularly providing engagement activities and events, having a rich calendar of events that people can come along to that have a celebratory and learning element to it. And as part of this, I think this is important work that builds an area-wide food identity, which is something every local area deserves to have. We all have a kind of shared experience around food that might be rooted on our geography, as well as the communities that make up our local area. So perhaps this is one way to start exploring what your local area's food identity is. And that's it for me. Thanks for bearing with my very fast speaking. This is a good reminder. Thanks, guys. So without further ado, I will pass on the platform to Mary. Mary, if you can come in. Thank you. Okay, Mary.
Right, there we are.
Don't forget to click on slideshow at the top.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It was hidden by the banner telling me I was now on. Hi everyone, I'm Mary Vickers. I will also heed the warning to talk slower because I've learned from some people you can get more in if you talk faster, but actually slower is often better. And I'm learning that, so bear with me. So my job is Community Food Coordinator in North East Lincolnshire, which is basically about two things. One, to help and encourage all our various community food providers to work together. We're quite a small unitary authority and we have 13 food banks, 14 food banks, hot food kitchens. They're all independent, they need a lot of collaboration, encouragement. And then, but the other part of my job, you have to feed hungry people, but arguably the more important part of my job in the long term is to encourage and facilitate projects which help people move away from the reliance on free food parcels. Food is the basis of so much in life, and so most of my work in that bit fits under community growing, cooking and healthy living. I am from Northeast, well, I live in Northeast Lincolnshire. I'm speaking to you from a snowy Hull this morning because I'm there on a training course for something else. There are a lot of words on the rest of my slides, very few pictures. That's partly because you can have the slides afterwards and see more things. So Edible Grimsby, that falls into the second bit of my job, and it started and is rolling on. It started when I was approached by a local arts and culture organisation about a project that a national celebrity chef and food campaigner was running. That kind of died a death quite quickly as far as North East Lincolnshire was concerned. And then I was approached by the cultural element in our council and a national organisation to be involved in the Best of Britain Festival, which if you haven't heard of, don't worry about it. It didn't quite happen how it was planned. And it was to celebrate the best of British food and British culture. And we put in a bid to put a small fringe event on for that. Started working on it, as you do, but then heard that the bid was unsuccessful. But in that time, Edible Grimsby was born, though it wasn't called that at the time. So what we did was a food-related arts and culture festival with community involvement. So who was involved in organising it? Well, in a sense, the lead organisation was a group called Emergency Exit Arts, based in the south of the UK. Culturally, locally, it was an organisation called the Culture House, but also another organisation, Our Big Picture, joined in as well. I was didn't chair the steering group, but it was focused around a lot of my work as community food coordinator. So I was on the steering group. The council had reps on the steering group, particular skill set reps, not just a council officer who was told to sit there. We had Green Futures represented, as a local community growing project, been going many years. We had a local chef who's a professional Indian chef in her own right, but does a lot of community work. And then we had other people on the steering group from task-specific roles. We did employ at one stage a project officer, but that didn't last very long. So the steering group members became more active than steering group members probably should. But it was us who were on the steering group who knew the patch, that we invited lots of community groups to be involved. We focused on 6 wards, which are either classed as deprived, one of them the 5th most deprived in the country, and also a couple of wards who feel that whilst they wouldn't say they're deprived, they always miss out on opportunities. So I had some existing and planned cookery workshops going on, and they were incorporated into this, which helped with the funding stream. And other existing growing projects were invited to participate as well, because I've got quite a big growing system going. And the plan was 18 months lead up to a large scale festival in the centre of town. North East Lincolnshire has 3 towns, Immingham, Grimsby and Cleethorpes. Grimsby is the largest. Grimsby is the one people know. Edible North East Lincolnshire doesn't quite trip off the tongue the same way as Edible Grimsby, but that's where the actual festival was. Our strapline was Grow, Cook, Share, which we still use. And also I had hashtag community growing NEL, which when that was set up, it's about communities who grow, but it's about growing communities. So all that kind of work was built into this rather than us doing new stuff. It was really the food related cultural aspect that was the new stuff. The funding came via North East Links Council from their then called Grimsby Create work stream. It's just changed its name to something else. Our funding actually came from the DCMS's Cultural Development Fund, which was, I don't know if it still is, I don't know if it still exists, but was administered by the Arts Council. So we had to fit in with Arts Council rules. I say the cooking workshops were already in the planning stage, and that was coming from other money, household support fund money that the council let me use occasionally for cooking workshops. And then we had buy-in from a few local companies, but we tried not to get too much company sponsorship for a variety of reasons. So we had 18 months from launch to festival, but the public launch was partway through that. COVID affected that. We didn't have the community event in the town hall, which was planned, which would have made the festival even more community based. I've never managed to do an online cook along on Zoom, but it actually worked amazingly well. So in those 6 wards, each ward had 2 6-week cookery workshops with budgetary advice. And community groups who cooked were encouraged to grow. Some, it was just windowsill herbs, others, it's whole allotments in the back of their community centre. But also specifically, community groups were encouraged to grow tomatoes because you could grow those in the ground, in a greenhouse, on your windowsill, wherever. So it was hopefully accessible. And these were pooled to make a community ketchup that was made by a local artisan sauce maker. The groups all received so many bottles free in return for their tomatoes, and others were sold on the festival, and some are still being sold now because it's quite long life. By ketchup, it's the kind of ketchup you sprinkle onto something rather than the sauce you make pasta dishes with. And part of the culture was that each community group held a neighbourhood festival in the summer. Most of those festivals were probably going to happen anyway, but we provided them with extra artistes or activities related to food. The actual festival is the 1st of October. You don't really plan an outdoor festival in October, but we had picked October all the way along because it's harvest time. And in all faiths, except for a couple, most of the faith groups celebrate Harvest Festival around September, October. But also in non-faith things, paganism does too, and lots of people think harvest, and that's what we were going for. So that's why we plan an outdoor festival in October. We were in the centre of town. The council had just spent a load of money on refurbishing, repaving the outside space. So they were keen for us to use it. And we also had Grimsby Minster, which is a huge church. Some think of it as an arts venue rather than a church. So that's how we were able to use that. But because, although we're only small, we are 3 communities and people don't travel. So part of our thing, we put buses on. We hired coaches and people brought people in. We started the day with a feast of ideas, and these were rapid fire talks, like 4 minutes or 10 minutes, and were controlled by a chef with a wooden spoon banging on a frying pan. And they were all global. There were global things. Somebody talked right from World Food, the World Bank and all their stuff on food. So it was right through to that, to a local food bank who talked about how they feed and care for their people, their clients. And we had everything in between, from cooks and allotmenteers. It was a huge range in the Feast of Ideas. That was about 2 and a bit hours. And then outside, we had various food-related cultural creators, artists, either roaming, musical bands, or they had a pitch. We had a farmer with a field that we made in the square. And there was cooking demonstration linked to a theatre group. We had a local music stage, which in one sense was nothing to do with food, but it celebrated local artists. But the thing that I'll always remember is that we had a tented community kitchen run by some of the community cooks. There was one professional cook in there, and some of the rest of the volunteers had never even cooked the year before, let alone served 3,000 free taste-aside meals to the general public. In the Minster, we had craft fairs and themed displays. We did allow in the end some paid for food concessions because we were only providing taste-aside meals. They were all local people, but for various reasons we had no alcohol. So the learning and the legacy: always know your funder and keep them in mind. Although the funding came through the council, it was Arts Council funding. One of the community groups who wanted to do cooking, but wasn't covered by the council funding, was in a church kitchen. And we learned quite quickly that Arts Council aren't always keen on faith buildings. They're not averse to them totally, which is why we can use the Minster, but it's something always to be aware of. Always know your partners. Emergency exit arts don't like to cook with meat or fish, which is fine if that's a choice. It's much, much, much easier for food hygiene rules at events, but it meant we couldn't celebrate Grimsby's fishing heritage, which was really sad. The big learning thing is everything takes longer than you think and is possibly harder too. But if you get there, it still works. Good weather makes things brilliant. We had a wonderfully sunny day. Legacy, I've only put 2 things there, but the legacy is actually bigger. We had a mini festival on the 7th of October. We're now going for the first Saturday in October every year. I know we won't hit the weather every time, but we had a mini festival this year next to one of our big community gardens. Similar activities, but fewer, and it was just free soup, vegetable soup. And then we've got our next large-scale festival for the 5th of October next year. Arts Council funding has been secured for that, but actually we are struggling with the community funding for the cooking activities and the growing activities. We have got some cooking activities planned for January to March this year. Some of those are using the same people, community groups, some are new community groups, but making that link from March to October is going to be hard if we don't get our funding. And I'll shut up there. You've just got a couple of pictures there of some of the events on the day. And if you see the slides afterwards, all my contact details are on the next slide, which you don't need to see now.
Great. Oh, thank you so much, Mary. Basically, just a reminder, guys, please put any questions in the chat because we will have a Q&A. But I'm just like grinning ear to ear. It's a fantastic piece of work. And I'll stop myself here and just pass on the platform to Ian and Purdy if you guys want to come in, and then we could talk about all of this during the Q&A. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, is that on the slideshow now?
Yes.
Great, lovely. We'll go from there then. Right. Okay, so great to see you, everyone. So I'm Ian Smith.
Sorry, Ian. It's still
Oh, you want to mute me, Vera? It's still. Can you go up? Yeah, can you go up actually up to the from beginning? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it hasn't clicked into the slideshow view yet.
Oh. It's
Just try
annoying
it.
because I keep clicking on that. It says
Yeah, and then you need
slideshow.
no, click on slideshow and then come down to the far left. Yeah, from beginning. Perfect.
Is that it? Great. Okay. So yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Ian Smith from Food Plymouth. I'm one of the core enabling team, been involved with Food Plymouth since 2011 now. And Purdy, would you like to say a bit about yourself?
Hi everybody, lovely to see you all. And I'm Purdy Giles from Purdy's Punjabi Cuisine, with a background in social work, which I integrate into my workshops, supper clubs and events, and sharing a bit about my cultural heritage, my story, holding space for other people to share their stories and journeys and learn together, cook together, share stories.
Brilliant. Lovely. Okay, so a bit of context for Plymouth then. So we're on the western approaches of the English Channel, fishing port, naval dockyard, military base, which means very often going out to do things to other people in the world they don't want done to them. We've got the Mayflower Steps here, which is what that pic is, where the Pilgrim Fathers left to start colonizing America, 1620. Obviously, Plymouth was also the base of Queen Elizabeth I's state-registered pirates, which later became known as privateers. That's Drake, Hawkins, Raleigh, and others, who were all slave traders, which isn't acknowledged the way it should be down here, frankly. And that was 1540s onwards. And many, many, many prominent places in and around Plymouth are named after those people. And there's a battle going on at the moment over a relatively recent naming that needs to be changed, basically. So there we go. So let's talk about Conscious Sisters and the settlement. This was an amazing piece of work that Fiona and Karen did, and they're on the call, which is great. marking the Mayflower 400 anniversary in 2020. And it was addressing the impacts of colonization on the native North American people. And there were all these features of art, performance, and everything else that went with it, along with the foraging and the food side. It was basically going to be a month-long encampment in Central Park in the centre of Plymouth, but sadly, and that was involving very much these native people and who were coming over. But sadly, COVID arose and snookered the whole thing in 2020. So it went online, and I think that was an amazingly fleet-footed response to that. I think what's absolutely crucial on this is that the interactions with the North American people and the cultures profoundly influenced and actually transformed the Conscious Sisters' own way of doing things, the whole way of thinking and doing things. And I think there's something really profound about that. And I saw that happening because I was on the fringe of it. Okay, so this led to Clankind, which came out of the settlement. And there was the indigenous lead artist, whose name I'm not going to mangle by trying to pronounce it, came to Plymouth twice, but also spotted that people in Plymouth were not connected to the land. And so Fiona and Karen tried to address that in the way it says on the screen there. And I really like this because I'd say about these things about things being named after Drake and Raleigh and Hawkins. There is Drake's Reservoir in the city centre, which is fed by Drake's Leat, which comes in from Dartmoor. So they recreated the Fisher's Feast, but in a multicultural way, and I think that's a quite extraordinary thing. And you can see the images there. So that's good. And then what is going on, and it relates, I think, very much to the situation with Grimsby there, is the Conscious Sisters are now doing the Gathering, which is reconnecting people to the sea in Plymouth. It's a city that's turned its back on the sea, and they're trying to turn it back. So it's celebrating fishing and fisher folk, and there's sea angling is involved, which so you often see Fiona waving a fishing rod around purposefully. So there we go. So I think that the important thing on that, I think, is to reconnect with indigenous people, indigenous to the area, as well as the wider global culture as well. There's, trying to balance those two up, I think, is a really important thing. Purdy, are you happy to take this one on, the Diversity Business Incubator?
Yes, I'll do my best. So the Diversity Business Incubator here in Plymouth it's a business hub, essentially, for minority ethnic entrepreneurs. And what they do is they offer support in all its forms, so grant funding, business planning, and holding space as well. So we've got the plot here in Plymouth, where there are some food vendors, and they've been supported through the process and are now running thriving businesses and offering food. It's culturally diverse, and it's a wonderful addition to our city. They also, during Black History Month, they played a massive part in recognising the contributions that people of African and Caribbean backgrounds have made to the UK over many generations. And what they had, I'm going to read what they did. Just they gave talks. They had well-being sessions and films, and also what was really lovely was at Plymouth City College. Is that the photograph there from Plymouth City College? They actually had food demonstrations from local chefs, and that was something that everybody within the community could actually join in with, share, contribute to the process, because cooking and sharing food is a gift that keeps on giving, and, it kind of binds us all together, our humanity, and sharing stories around it. And they held space for everybody. And what they've done is really increase the visibility of the diverse Black and minority ethnic business owners in the community, as well as build very strong links with other businesses across Devon. Actually, they're quite prolific, and the work that they do is pretty amazing, and it's great to be part of that. And I think they want to address, you know, issues around diversity, to build resilience and community, but also to tackle tackle discrimination as well on the grounds of race. And they have their own headquarters in the city of Plymouth as well, which is a thriving hub and great to be part of.
Brilliant. Okay, so that first slide on the box and the bazaar there is way overpopulated. That's really poor editing on my part. So please read that afterwards, because there is some key info in there as well. It's a fantastic summary by Purdy. Thanks very much for getting me out the mire for bad writing there. Now, more credit to Purdy here, because let's this is a nice one to end on. So this is Purdy at Flavorfest. Flavorfest is a really major food festival that happens in Armada Way, another Drake reference, that goes right through the middle of Plymouth city centre there. And it's a really, and the cookery demonstrations are one of the key and most popular features of that event. So Purdy debuted there on the demonstration stage this year, and celebrating her own journey of reconnection with her Punjabi heritage. And it's been an amazing thing that I've seen Purdy go through for the last 5 or 6 years. And exploring and expressing this through food and cultural activities that Purdy said in her introduction to herself there. And I like this thing about summing it up as soul food with love from the Punjab. I think that's a brilliant thing to have in the city that Purdy brings. The picture is really interesting. That is the executive chef, Peter Gorton, who is from the Horn of Plenty in Tavistock, which is certainly UK famous, if not world famous. And he does a lot of international consultancy work in the field of catering and related industries. And that's Purdy and him dancing during Purdy's demonstration. And I thought, you can see people enjoying it in the audience there. So I thought that was a nice way to finish on there. Here's some slides with some contact details on, which obviously will come through when we're there. So that's our time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Purdy and Ian. That was absolutely fantastic. Again, it's just incredible, and I can't wait for us to discuss this further. Without further ado, I'll pass on to Lauren, our final speaker. Thank you.
Bear with me, I'm just bringing up my presentation.
Honest to goodness, I think that it's actually quite hard to share screen and navigate PowerPoint.
So that was a very tiny video from one of the very wet events that we had as part of the Growing Together part. I've included it because it was kind of like, it was very fun through the whole process. And also there were some where we kind of had to be quite resilient in that. You can see there, I'm completely drenched as well, and we were having a children's activity, but we were still in very good spirits as part of that. Oh, we don't need to hear it again. So the Growing Together in Peterborough project was a 2-month program of events exploring and celebrating food systems in Peterborough through August and September. We had 80 partners from across the unitary area, and we had 60 events across the 2 months. All of those were completely free because we wanted to ensure that they were accessible. They included exhibitions, talks, workshops, performances, some of the art creation. We had storytelling, we had visual digital art, and then we also had speakers from kind of national and local leaders as well as artists, covering everything from farming, permaculture, soil, looking at fasting, looking at Southeast Asian views, sustainability, refugees experience, community growing, advertising around food, and across kind of, we wanted to encompass loads of different areas of what the food system looks at. So a big part for us was the fact that food connects us and holds a wealth of inspiration and connections, as well as cultural sharing. And we wanted to celebrate that through this whole program as well. But how did we actually get there? So before we started, if I can go back. Before we started, we in 2022, we had focus groups of about 300 citizens across Peterborough. And we accessed some of those citizens through dialogues with organisations, community groups and citizens. So a lot of the actual programming came from what citizens wanted to see in the city, and also the questions that they were raising regarding the food system or what was happening within our area or the gaps that they were seeing. So we had a time of reflection, and a big part of that as well is some of the citizens that came forward were already professional artists as well. And they were really, really engaged with this idea of kind of merging together the food system and their arts practice and wanting to connect those two together. And so we wanted to use the tools of art to explore sometimes difficult or complex ideas around food. Also, sometimes it's very difficult to have the conversations around food because it can be, it can be quite painful as well to kind of talk about your experience with that. And so we had loads of dialogue and reflection. The big part about the kind of the whole lead up towards this was a real reflecting part of kind of like we would have discussions and we would reflect on what's come out of those discussions. A big thing as well was ensuring that with the offers from different organisations or different venues from across the area, it was it possible? We had a number of ideas that we couldn't do. So this whole programme was actually a big pilot. We've never done anything like this in our area. And a big part was the fact that, this was a pilot for the city, as well as to see how sometimes people say they want something and then they may not necessarily turn up. And so let's see how people and see what surprises came up. And that was a big part as well of bringing together information for us to actually put in a bid to the Arts Council. So to give you an idea of this year, so I wrote the submission across January to May. So we submitted in May. We then found out that we were successful with the Arts Council at the beginning of July. And we had about a month to kind of finalise all of those bookings, all of the artists, all of the venues, to get the brochure up and running and to get key parts done. And then we launched in August and went through to October. So that writing the submission part was actually really key, and we had to be really open with our partners as well, of going, we're going to have a short lead time. If this comes through, we've got a really short lead time, but with the understanding as well that people's, if we've had a conversation in February, actually by July someone's ability to offer may have changed. And so we also had to be quite flexible with that as well. And we did have different artists and different venues having to shift what they were able to offer as well. But we were having to be, really important part of it was being really, really open and being flexible to what that could be. And it was hard. It was really hard to kind of get everything done in a month and launch. But we did do it. So we were really kindly supported by the Arts Council. Part of it was that we had a central exhibition, which was in the Peterborough Museum and Art Gallery, and all of the boards. So we had 30 information boards about different organisations and partners from across Peterborough celebrating what they do in this city. And that's from schools, farmers, charities, youth council, of what they're focusing on, what they're really, really passionate about. And the Peterborough Museum and Art Gallery were amazing with their support as well for that. So if the Arts Council funding didn't come through, we were still having this exhibition, and we did have a, if we don't get the funding, kind of a fallback position to go to ensure. We were very lucky. We have an arts organisation as well in Peterborough called Metal, which are across the country in different areas, and so they were able to be a critical friend to us. So they were able to offer us feedback when we had kind of done our first draft of what we were considering, and then the organisation Flourish as well was very keen, kind of offering support as well. So we had a kind of plan A and plan B, and luckily we managed to do our plan A. And a big part of that is, so before the launch of the exhibition, we had in less than 10 days, 10 windows across the city go up in different venues, which the key part of the venues was the fact that you could see them at any time of day and you would walk by them. So they're in key routes around the city. So therefore, if you're not necessarily engaged in food organizations, or if you're not necessarily engaged in culture, you would still kind of be able to experience some of this and see that there was something was coming. So they kind of started popping up on different days across. So we had 10 key themes. The big part about this as well was in conversation with the artists. So all artists had the remit that they would be drawing on a window. They had to use white Posca pens. And that was quite a new process for some of the artists as well. All of the artists got paid for their work, and we ensured as well throughout the whole of the program that everyone got fairly paid. So we were ensuring the kind of like, we are really, really keen on food sovereignty, and we wanted to ensure that actually that was mirrored within the whole of this program as well, that people were getting fairly paid and people had fair time as well within that. The artists, to some degree, got to choose what their key theme was. So we had the kind of, through the partnership, we chose what areas we wanted, and then the artists got a really key thing as well with these artworks was that it was within those artists' style. So it wasn't there was going to be a back and forth for how that artwork was going to look. It was up to that individual artist. So the artist had the autonomy over what their artwork looked like, and their response to what these key themes were. They could ask, and we certainly gave, if they wanted to do, say, climate, we did give feedback on like, these are key themes and these are keys, like points across. But it was, yeah, certainly, it was amazing to see how they creatively responded as well, and how people could watch them putting up their artwork as well. So it was an experience of them putting it up as well as it happening. So you can see here on the right hand side, this is Lee Mason, met guys. He's really, really amazing artist in AI and VR. And here you can see a child that's interacting with him while he's actually drawing the piece. And we had a lot of different interactions across different, when the artists were putting up their different ones. So he's doing gut health here. And then on the left-hand side, we have Care 5, who's looking at compost and doing this. So the one on the right is a shop that's not being used anymore. One on the left is actually in a window that's in a shopping centre outside of the city, but it's also where there was a theatre company and an art studio as well.
Sorry, Lauren, just a couple of more minutes if that's okay. Apologies for having to come in. Sorry.
So this is the one on climate. This is the one that was in a food hall. So advertising kind of what's being sold inside the food hall as well. And then we have one at a cafe, which was social food. This one is in a theatre. This one is taking over a greenhouse. And then this is the exhibition, one of the exhibition boards. So we had a number of exhibition boards. The beautiful artwork was created by a co-op that's in Peterborough, and who also designed the boards. importantly, with the exhibition as well, all of the 30 boards were interdispersed with artwork that was created by our local artists, all on the theme of food. And there was also videos shown at the same time. And then we had some information boards as well. Really important part was accessibility for the whole of this project. So we did have a print version and an online version of the whole program, but we also had it audio described as well. And we also had a BSL translation of the whole of the brochure as well, to ensure that communities could access them. And then all of the program was offered. So if BSL interpreters were required, we offered those as part of that as well, so that that community could be part. So here you can see some of the different events. And then this is one of the ones that was kind of more children's based, looking at what their favorite foods were as well. This one was on a farm, so we were really lucky that one of the artists is a farmer as well, so they are part of and then this is on one of the farms in the area. It wasn't her farm, this is Kate Jennifer, and this is on the Harvest Barn farm, and we were discussing about farming in the area. And it was open, so anybody could come. So, and it was who turned up kind of decided the level of conversation that was going to be exploring farming as well. Really lucky that some of the artist facilitators really well versed within food as well. Here we have so we had a cookery show, but Leah, who's on the right side, is deaf, so she's a BSL cook. So we ensured that the whole of this was the first time she'd ever done a mix of BSL and hearing audience. And she's very popular with BSL. She's a Greek and she's incredible chef. And so we had a specific where BSL was the main language of this cookery show, and then it was translated so that the BSL community could actually have to experience it first. It was really popular. This is one where we have quite a lot of clay around us. So here we're making paint pigments with Sue Shields. Sue is now based in Scotland, but she came down specifically to do these workshops where we're making pigment from the soils that are actually from here as well. Which was really popular, and also exploring the idea of kind of the importance of soil. Then we had, so this is one of the talks where we partnered with ISLA, which is a research exploring what Southeast Asian experiences of food are. So these were 4 key members of the community, and they did 3 different ones looking at fasting, sustainability, and food sharing as well. And then we had, what does Peterborough taste like? So we partnered with Syntax. So 4 poets chose what they thought Peterborough tastes like. We then Flourish was where we had to create the dishes that they wanted. And then the performance of the evening was that the 4 poets performed their 4 poems and discussed what they thought Peterborough tastes like. The audience then discussed, but then they also had the tasting of what Peterborough kind of tastes like at the same time of the different poets performing as well, which was really good fun and quite a different way. And we were really lucky that actually a lot of the creatives came up with lots of different ideas of how they wanted to engage different people and different art forms from across the city. This is a still life where people were looking at different still lifes, but also discussing kind of where food comes from, and like what's local food and what's not. This is from a printmaking workshop that happened, which was looking at advertising and how advertising is represented across as well. And then we were running a food survey alongside at the same time as well. So that was across, it's quite a very large food survey at the same time. So some of the feedback that we've got from the Growing Together program is the importance of kind of reaching outside our bubbles. and sharing resources, advocating and amplifying what is already happening in Peterborough is really key. We celebrated what was already happening, and we weren't creating something brand new as well, but creatively kind of exploring those themes. A massive amount of new relationships were created, also increasing like the importance of accessibility and people's different access needs, and how we can ensure that that's always at the forefront of when we're programming, as well as highlighting some of the complexities of the food system as well. So we had different levels of, I suppose, how far we deep dived into what a food system is and what the different key themes were within that. And then some of the arts organizations as well, like they're now rethinking how they're programming. And they were really, really kind of being quite upfront about what was kind of needed post-pandemic. There we go. There was kind of fly through. There was so much could have done there.
Oh, that is amazing. I don't know about you, I'm just completely floored by all 3 local areas and what you guys have shared. So absolutely huge thanks. I'm just slightly beaming. Just quickly, I love the idea of community ketchup and Northeast Links. And I'm just kind of like, what other community dishes might happen in another area? And the idea of harvest is a part of the rhythm of cultural life that is shared across so many cultures. So it's a kind of our shared heartbeat. The idea of reconnecting with land and the sea is something that we forget. Cooking and sharing food is a gift that keeps on giving, which just really activated my heart. And the lesson of being flexible and having a plan B is such an important learning. And food as a tool, art as a tool to explore difficult and complex ideas. And I think as systems nerds, we appreciate how complex talking about food is. And also, what does Peterborough taste like? I love that it's so much more than a jug of woo-woo. That is just incredible. Guys, we have 10 minutes. I would love to open the floor for questions. I know we've had some in the chat, so feel free to ask if you've had a good question. Raise your hand and ask. And if you've had one bubbling up, go ahead. So I'll just look for anybody who uses the raise hand function, or if you can't find it, just unmute yourself and go hi. Just real quick, for the sake of the recording, there was a question on funding. So yeah, how much did these projects cost overall? Mary, do you want to take it forward first?
I just checked while other people were speaking. Our actual cultural grant for the festival day and any non-food cultural things that went on in the 18 months was 110,000. And the budget for the cooking lessons was 40,000. So yeah, that's how much we did as a rough thing. And there were just odd things coming in from other places.
Ian and Purdy, I know it's a big question, but maybe if you can choose like one of the work strands you spoke about.
Yeah, I put a bit in the chat around that really, but so I think on the funding front, it's really interesting because we're very decentralized and rely a lot on the partners and the network on these things and other things. So really, all the things we spoke about there were funded through the organizations attracting their own funding and putting these events on with a food dimension to them. So as the Sustainable Food Partnership, there's very little direct cost associated with that. I mean, we go along, we support, we do things there if we can. I think at one of the ones at the box, the bazaar, we put an Always Apples Festival, which was centrally funded, like a roadshow event on for that to bring the apples in the autumn. But that's it really. It's down to people getting us involved when they've already got their own money, which is quite extraordinary, really. So yeah, brilliant.
Lauren, do you have anything on
Yeah, so the whole of the Growing Together program was £30,000. We did have 12,500 in-kind support, which enabled us to go for the 30,000. We also then, because with Arts Council you have You can go for a pot of funding, but then they also have an accessibility pot. So we then went for which you can kind of add on, which ensures that people can access. And that was, I think, just under 3,000, which pays for BSL interpreters. It paid for audio description. We're about to launch a zine as well that's come out from the screen printing, and which will be audio described as well as part of that.
That's fantastic. And the accessibility elements of the festival, I think, were really laudable. Thanks. Mish and Flora, you have a question. Go on, come on in.
Hello, hello, and deep gratitude for such a enlivening session, and thank you so much for slowing down. I think white people have this sense of urgency, which I think is part of why we feel we've got to fill time and have such a kind of pace. So I trust that I might be able to slow down and be more spacious. It was wonderful to have that introduction about the dedication to multiculturalism and to figuring out ways that we can be creating cultures of belonging. And I think we need to be really careful about our language, because as soon as we start using the word inclusion, we are actually suggesting that we already have something that exists that we need to include people into. And I think the idea of co-creation has a much stronger and viable future if we are really, really seeking to be multicultural. I also feel that when we start referencing minorities, we're also inaccurate, because actually Black and brown kin are the global majority. So I think it's really important that we highlight and name these commitments and intentions, and then we need to do our homework as to how the language can help actually reflect our intention. And there was one way also I felt that we could broaden our relationship to each other by getting a sense of not only our genders and our names, but instead of having, I do a lot of work around whiteness and blackness and political and psychological healing. And there's always a reference to whether we're white or black. And I feel that we could actually extend this to saying our actual cultures. You know, I'm French, I have Jewish heritage, and I was born on Zimbabwean soil, and I'm white. So something about opening up the whole understanding of what it means to be culturally diverse. So that was just a thought because of your recognition and your ample openness to what cultures where we actually all have a sense of belonging, because we're all contributing and we are still celebrating difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think it's an important lesson around co-creation and starting from a collaborative base and not expecting people to come to you is a really huge bit. Although sometimes when you got money for an event, you do, as in some of these cases, have a central event. But I think there's some fantastic examples of these sort of decentralized event programs. I know we're running out of time. Just one more question I think would be really good. How are these things like festivals evaluated? Trin from Southwark. I don't know. Sorry, Trin, do you want to come in? Actually, I think we have time. But yeah, come on in if you feel up for it to ask your question. I think it's really important.
That's okay. Sorry. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for everything. I was just curious about how you evaluate festivals. I think Mary's put a response in the chat as well, but I guess I was kind of curious. I used to organize political festivals, which I guess it's interesting because I mean the point of that was like the discourse and how important that was, just having like cross-party conversation. I suppose with food it's something else. Like, is it just trying to get the information out there? And it probably depends depending on where you're from. So I'd just be interested to hear from all of you. Okay.
Can I just add to what I've put in the chat about the surveys we put out on social media streams afterwards and the work we did with community groups? One of the things that was fascinating is Grimsby has a low self-esteem image corporately. There are some who are really into the place, and it's very easy to grumble. And one of the things that you can't evaluate quantitatively, but so many people who were overheard on the day, and the sunshine helped. This is a great day. We need more of this locally. And we kept hearing that anecdotally for several months. And when we did the smaller festival last month for this year, we had some stuff from a number of people who said, oh, why wasn't it as big as last year? We really missed it. So it's all that non-tangible, non-quantifiable stuff that we added to the survey.
I'm Purdy or Ian. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, Plymouth folk.
I'd just like to say that, my background as a social worker, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about food, warmth and shelter being at the very basic of our human needs. And I love what was just shared about co-creation. So for me, my mantra throughout when I started this journey and moved away from trauma-based work was, it's about co-creation, collaboration, cooperation, and this builds community. And food is, we celebrate and share it. It has a language of its own that bypasses any kind of visible or invisible difference. And it's a wonderful gift, as I said earlier, to share. And it's great to be part of that process and that journey.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, is there time that maybe Ella could say something about how Diversity Business Incubator do it, or are we out of time now?
What, go ahead. I'll continue recording. Yeah, please, Ella, if you'd like to come in, that'd be brilliant to hear about evaluation, especially.
Hello, everyone. I was just starting to type in, but I suppose there's a little bit too much to type in. So for the Black History Month, we run a lot of events, and all the events, you can book your tickets through Eventbrite. So this is how we kind of keep track on the numbers that are coming. We also have the sign-in sheets, so we know exactly how many people attended the event. And we also have, we gather the contact details. So after the event, we send up the feedback form. I wouldn't say that we get 100% response, but we, based on the feedback we gather, we write impact reports that we then share with the funders. In terms of the bazaar, because the bazaar is something that DBI is doing in partnership with the Box, which is the museum in Plymouth. So again, in terms of the feedback, we collect the feedback from the vendors. We as DBI, we collect feedbacks from the vendors because we look after the vendors. And from the Box, we get information about the footfall. They have their own ways of measuring how many people attend, and we know for sure that on the days that the bazaar was happening, the footfall was much higher than it would be on any other Saturday. And we've just had a meeting actually yesterday with the Box regarding the feedback, and everyone's so excited about it. There's a lot of enthusiasm around it. It's such a lovely, vibrant place and event that people want to see more of it. So I suppose the conversations we are having also add to the feedback. And based on everything that we gather, I would then just sit down and do an impact report that we can share with everyone.
Oh, great. Lauren, do you want to share anything about gathering feedback and what funders are interested in as well to sort of hear.
Yeah, so we've got the sort of we had the attendees. So I think because we weren't a festival, it wasn't just a one-day thing. It was, you know, multiple different events and then centralized around one. So probably I didn't mention is as well, we went actually into communities to host these events, and we did that across in rural and in central areas. So we so we had the attendees, we had their feedback for some of the events. So with the BSL event, like actually having a formalized form when you've got sort of 50, 60 people in a room and trying to run around and get all of those, it wasn't appropriate. And actually sometimes if BSL is your first language, it's really difficult to then read a form as well. So we ensured that there were specific ways that people could feed in that matched their accessibility as well. We then did, so even with the run up, we had a lot of reflection and co-creation. Actually, at the end of the program as well, we had a reflection meal for partners and for artists. Those who couldn't attend the reflection meal were sent out key questions that were explored in the reflection meal to ensure that they had kind of key ways that they could. And also it meant that we actually had an underspend. So it meant that to keep in that kind of like, we've created this together, they then decided what the other events are going to be. And it was decided we're not going to do it this year. We're going to have a little bit of load time and we're going to do those events next year. So yeah, we're ensuring that at every point that there is these reflection points as well. And what comes out of those reflection meals and discussions is then documented. So we have a number of different ways, and also with the reflections and what's happened within the events, the artists reflected at the end of each of their practices as well. So we've got all of that information, so they're creatively fed into that. And the whole of this program then feeds into as well the creation of the first food strategy in this area. So all of that data then goes into that as well.
That's fantastic. I really wowed by the idea of a reflection meal for partners and participants and artists. I think that is a good idea. And such a great way to bring people together to celebrate what they've achieved, which I know for you guys, for everybody doing this work, no small feast. And I'm sure it was incredibly stressful, but also really just, yeah, a sense of achievement. It sounds, I'd like to bring this to a close, but I think a couple of bits of homework. First of all, I know there's been some fantastic chat. So if it's okay with everybody, I would love to save and share the chat. Please email me separately if for any reason you don't want your comments to be included in there. We will probably aim to included with the event, where we share the slides. So do let me know if you want anything of yours to be taken out by emailing me separately. There's also been a lot of discussion around sharing evaluation reports. I think this is a brilliant idea. So let's reconvene on that with the speakers. Anything that you guys could signpost to or share. Again, we can, put up PDFs for people to download. I think that's a gorgeous idea to look at the outcomes and then think about what similar work in other areas might look like. I think all of this is really, really good. There's a lot of rich resource here. So I guess without further ado, I just want to huge thanks to everybody for participating, for sharing your stories, your approaches, for asking fantastic and important questions, and making really important points. So absolutely, I'm likewise really full of gratitude. This work really brings my heart so much warmth when, a lot of times we're fighting fires. But I think this work is extremely important, especially in times of difficulty. Really touched by some of the stuff that Mary and I think all of you guys are saying here is about how much people need this kind of stuff when there's a lot of other major challenges. When food can be a really triggering and challenging traumatic experience, there are ways to bring celebration to be part of that healing. I'm talking too much, sorry. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. So I'll stop the recording, but you can leave in your own time and we'll share everything, the presentations and any other resources that we spoke about here. Thank you.